She looked like just another retired woman enjoying the sea breeze on a quiet morning. Alone, peaceful, vulnerable. But when the patrol shows up, acting like it's just a routine inspection, things turn dark fast. Thin threats, strange equipment, smirks that hide something worse. She plays along until they push too far. Then, one look at what's hidden below deck changes everything. Because she's not just a sailor. She's the last person they wanted to mess with. But what secret mission brought her out of retirement? Every story brings us a little closer together. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. It's a joy to see how far this family of listeners reaches. The morning sun painted streaks of orange and pink across the San Diego horizon as Admiral Catherine Kate Flint stood at the helm of her 40-foot yacht, the Compass Rose. Her weathered hands rested easily on the wheel, a gesture as natural to her as breathing after 35 years in the United States Navy. The salty breeze tousled her silver hair, and her sharp blue eyes scanned the peaceful waters with the same alertness that had served her well during countless operations in the Persian Gulf. Beside her, Anchor, her golden retriever, lounged contentedly on the deck. His tail thumped against the polished wood whenever she glanced his way. "At least you're easy to please, old friend," Kate murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. The quiet morning routine had become her sanctuary since retirement. After decades of commanding massive naval vessels and coordinating complex military operations, the modest yacht felt just right. No more heavy responsibilities, no more life or death decisions weighing on her shoulders. Just the gentle rock of the waves and the company of her faithful dog. Kate checked her watch. 7 o'clock. Time for her weekly call with Melissa. Her stomach tightened as she pulled out her phone, a familiar tension that always preceded these conversations. The phone rang 3 times before her daughter answered. "Hi, Mom." Melissa's voice sounded tired even through the phone. Kate could picture her daughter's face, so like her own but softer, probably already dressed for another long day at work. "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you and Tommy doing?" "We're managing." A pause. "The heating bill was higher than expected this month, but we'll figure it out." Kate's fingers drummed against the wheel. "I could help with that, you know. It wouldn't be any trouble." "We're fine, Mom." Melissa's tone carried that edge of stubborn pride that Kate recognized from her own voice. "Tommy's growing like a weed. His teacher says he's reading above grade level." "That's wonderful." Kate smiled, though her heart ached. Her grandson was already 8 years old, yet she could count on one hand the number of times she'd seen him in person. "Maybe you both could come visit sometime? The Compass Rose has plenty of room and Tommy might enjoy learning to fish." The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. "Maybe," Melissa finally said. But Kate knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used herself when giving non-committal answers to subordinates. "Melissa, I know things between us haven't been—" "Mom, I need to get Tommy ready for school." Another pause. "Take care of yourself, okay?" The call ended, leaving Kate alone with the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Anchor sensed her mood and pressed against her leg, offering silent comfort. She blinked hard against the moisture in her eyes, remembering all the school plays and parent-teacher conferences she'd missed while deployed. The birthdays celebrated through quick video calls. The graduation she'd barely made it back for, arriving just as Melissa's name was being called. "I did what I thought was right," she whispered to the horizon. "Serving my country, protecting people. But I forgot to protect what mattered most." Anchor whined softly, and Kate managed a small smile. "Yes, I know. No use dwelling on past mistakes." She moved with practiced efficiency, preparing her fishing gear for the morning routine. The familiar actions helped steady her hands and quiet her mind. Kate had commanded thousands of sailors during her career, led successful operations in hostile waters, earned medals and commendations that now sat in a box in her cabin. Yet she couldn't bridge the gulf between herself and her only child. The morning sun climbed higher as Kate arranged her tackle box and checked her lines. She'd found peace in this retirement routine. The quiet mornings, the gentle roll of the waves, Anchor's loyal companionship. But peace wasn't the same as happiness, and all her tactical expertise couldn't help her navigate the troubled waters of her relationship with Melissa. She baited her hook with practiced precision, remembering how her own father had taught her to fish. He'd been career military too, but somehow he'd managed to be present in ways she never had. "I missed something important there," she mused aloud to Anchor, who watched her preparations with patient interest. Some crucial lesson about balance. The fishing rod felt solid in her hands as she prepared to cast her line. Here, at least, was something simple and straightforward. No complex military strategies needed, no delicate emotional negotiations required. Just the eternal dance between fisher and fish as old as humanity itself. But as she stood ready to cast, Kate couldn't shake the image of Melissa's tired face or the sound of that defensive edge in her voice. All her military training had taught her to complete the mission, no matter the cost. Now, in retirement, she was learning that some costs were too high, and some missions, like rebuilding a relationship with her daughter, required different kinds of courage altogether. The rising sun cast long shadows across the water as Kate settled into her favorite fishing spot. Anchor dozed nearby, his golden fur catching the early morning light. The familiar weight of the fishing rod in her hands brought a sense of peace that almost made her forget the difficult conversation with Melissa. A distant mechanical growl broke the morning calm. Kate's eyes, trained by decades of naval experience, immediately tracked the sound to its source. A sleek speedboat cut through the water about half a mile away, moving fast enough to leave a prominent wake. Something about its movement pattern seemed off to her experienced eye. Too erratic for a pleasure craft, too purposeful for someone joyriding. The boat suddenly slowed and Kate's breath caught in her throat. Through her polarized sunglasses, she watched as three dark shapes were pushed over the side. They splashed into the water with a heaviness that made her stomach turn. Her mind refused to accept what her instincts were screaming. Those weren't packages being dumped. They were bodies. Anchor lifted his head and growled softly. Kate's hands moved automatically, muscle memory from years of crisis response taking over. She reached for her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her system. "This is retired Admiral Catherine Flint on the yacht Compass Rose, calling San Diego Harbor Patrol. Priority communication regarding suspicious activity in Sector 7-3. Over." The response came quickly, too quickly, a part of her mind noted. "This is Lieutenant Commander Voss, Harbor Patrol. Go ahead, Admiral." Kate's military training flagged several irregularities. The response didn't follow standard protocol, and a lieutenant commander wouldn't typically handle routine patrol communications. But the urgency of the situation pushed these concerns aside. "I've witnessed a speedboat dumping what appears to be..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Human-sized objects into the water at coordinates 32 degrees, 41 minutes north, 117 degrees, 14 minutes west. Vessel heading southeast at approximately 30 knots. White hull, dark blue trim, registration number not visible from my position." There was a brief crackle of static before Voss's voice returned. "Thank you for the report, Admiral. We have units in the area. Please maintain your position and stand by for contact." Kate's unease grew. The response was wrong. No request for additional details, no standard confirmation protocols. She'd commanded enough operations to know when something didn't add up. The speedboat had disappeared into the morning haze, but Kate kept her eyes fixed on the spot where the objects had entered the water. Anchor's continued low growling matched her rising sense of danger. She reached for her binoculars, focusing on the distant patch of ocean. The water's surface remained unbroken. Whatever had been dumped was well below the surface now. Her radio crackled again. "Admiral Flint, this is Lieutenant Commander Voss. We have units responding. Please switch to Channel 16 for coordination." Kate's jaw tightened. Channel 16 was the international distress frequency. No legitimate harbor patrol officer would request switching to that channel for this type of communication. Her 35 years of naval experience screamed that something was very wrong. She keyed the radio but didn't respond, her mind racing through possibilities. If the harbor patrol was compromised, who could she trust? The Coast Guard would be the logical choice, but using her radio again might give away that she suspected something was wrong. Anchor's growl suddenly deepened, and Kate turned to see another boat approaching from the direction of the harbor. This one was moving more slowly, deliberately, its profile matching that of a harbor patrol vessel. Her trained eye noted details automatically, standard patrol markings, but the hull number was wrong for this sector. The radio came to life once more. "Admiral Flint, please acknowledge and switch to Channel 16. The voice was still professional, but there was an edge to it now that raised the hair on the back of her neck. Kate stood at her helm, decades of command experience warring with her instincts for self-preservation. She had witnessed something she wasn't meant to see, and her attempt to report it had alerted the wrong people. The approaching patrol boat might as well have been broadcasting its hostile intent. Her hand moved to the radio one last time, but instead of responding, she quietly turned it off. The patrol boat was still too far away to see her clearly, and the morning sun was behind her, making her difficult to spot. She had a choice to make, and she needed to make it fast. Anchor pressed against her leg, his usual playful demeanor replaced by alert watchfulness. Kate looked down at her faithful companion, then back at the approaching threat. The tactical part of her mind was already formulating options, evaluating escape routes, assessing the situation with the same precision that had kept her alive through decades of military service. She'd wanted a peaceful retirement, but it seemed the universe had other plans. Whatever she had just witnessed, whoever was involved, she had unknowingly stumbled into something dangerous, and now she had to decide her next move while a corrupted harbor patrol unit closed in on her position. Lieutenant Commander Rico Voss stood in the cramped radio room of the harbor patrol station, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the communications console. The morning sun streaming through the narrow windows did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in his chest when he heard Admiral Flint's voice come through the speaker. "Play it again," he ordered the young radio operator who nervously rewound the recording. Admiral Catherine Flint's clear, commanding voice filled the room once more, describing exactly what she had witnessed. Each word hammered another nail into what Voss had thought was a perfectly secure operation. He ran a hand over his perfectly pressed uniform, a habit that helped him think. She saw the whole thing, the disposal of the Martinez brothers and their cousin. His voice was quiet, controlled, masking the rage and fear churning beneath his professional exterior. Through the window, he could see the morning fog starting to lift over the marina where his smuggling operation had run smoothly for the past 3 years. The harbor's legitimate shipping traffic provided perfect cover for moving drugs up and down the coast. Until now, they had managed to keep everything hidden behind a facade of normal port operations. "Sir?" The radio operator looked up at him uncertainly. "What should we tell the Admiral?" Voss's cold gray eyes fixed on the young man. "Nothing yet. Get me Rodriguez and Chen, now." Minutes later, his two most trusted officers entered the room. They had been with him since the beginning, when he first realized how easy it would be to use his position to facilitate drug movements through the port. The money had been too good to pass up, and his connections in the harbor patrol had made it all possible. "We have a situation," Voss said, playing the recording one more time. Rodriguez and Chen listened in silence, their faces growing grim as they understood the implications. "An admiral," Chen muttered. "Of all the people who could have been out there." "She's not just any admiral," Voss cut in. "I know her reputation. Catherine Flint ran anti-smuggling operations in the Persian Gulf. She won't let this go." He paced the small room, his movements tight and controlled. "And she has connections all the way up the chain of command. If she reaches out to her old networks..." Rodriguez leaned against the wall. "What are our options?" "Only one," Voss replied, his voice hardening. "We can't risk her talking to anyone else. She has to be eliminated." The word hung in the air. They had killed before. The Martinez brothers had been loose ends that needed tying up. But an admiral was different. It would bring heat they had never dealt with before. "It has to look like an accident," Chen said, always the practical one. "A tragic boating mishap. They happen all the time." Voss nodded slowly. "We'll approach under the guise of a routine inspection. She's already expecting harbor patrol response." He turned to Rodriguez. "Get the interceptor ready. Full patrol markings, but switch out the hull numbers. Use the ones from the northern sector. And if she resists? Rodriguez asked. She won't have the chance. Voss checked his sidearm, a gesture that spoke louder than words. We can't afford loose ends, not with what's at stake. The scope of their operation flashed through his mind. The millions in drug money, the network of corrupt officials and port workers, the cartel connections. They had built something too valuable to lose because one retired admiral happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chen, monitor all frequencies. If she tries to contact anyone else, especially the Coast Guard, I want to know immediately. Voss straightened his uniform again. Rodriguez, get Thompson and Walker. Tell them to arm up but keep everything concealed. We need to look completely legitimate until we're alongside her yacht. As his men moved to carry out his orders, Voss studied the harbor map on the wall. Admiral Flint's position was marked with a red pin. Soon that spot would be empty, and their operation would be secure again. The thought should have bothered him more than it did, but years of corruption had worn away whatever moral hesitation he might once have had. Sir, the radio operator called out. She's not responding to our last transmission. Voss smiled grimly. She's suspicious already. Probably those decades of command experience telling her something's wrong. He headed for the door. It doesn't matter. In an hour, Admiral Catherine Flint will have her tragic accident and our little problem will be solved. He stepped out into the morning sun, watching as his men prepared the patrol boat for launch. The weight of his concealed weapon pressed against his side, a reminder of what needed to be done. He had come too far, built too much to let one witness, no matter how decorated, bring it all crashing down. Time to go fishing, he muttered to himself, heading toward the dock where his men waited. The morning was still young, and there was work to be done. The morning sun glinted off the white hull of the harbor patrol vessel as it cut through the calm waters toward the Compass Rose. Kate stood at her yacht's stern, one hand absently stroking Anchor's golden fur while she watched their approach. Something about the patrol boat's movement caught her trained eye. They were coming in fast, almost aggressive for a civilian encounter. Good morning, ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Voss called out as they drew alongside. His smile seemed practiced, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Routine safety inspection today. Kate kept her expression pleasant and slightly confused, the way any civilian retiree might react. Of course, officers. Would you like to come aboard? She watched as 4 officers, led by Voss, stepped onto her deck. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated for a simple inspection team. Kate felt her combat instincts stirring beneath her carefully maintained facade of elderly innocence. Beautiful morning for fishing, Voss commented, his gray eyes scanning the deck with unsettling intensity. Though the waters can be treacherous this time of year. We've had our share of unfortunate accidents. Is that so? Kate's voice carried just the right touch of elderly concern as she clutched her cardigan closer. I always try to be careful out here. 2 younger officers moved toward the cabin while another positioned himself near the stern. Their formation was tactical. They were blocking potential escape routes. Kate recognized the pattern from her own training days. Sometimes being careful isn't enough, one of the younger officers added, his hand resting casually near his holstered weapon. Waves can come out of nowhere. Equipment can fail. All sorts of things can go wrong at sea. Kate nodded, playing up her role as she fumbled with her reading glasses. Oh my, that sounds frightening. Would you officers like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. That's very kind, Voss replied, following her toward the galley. His boots made heavy sounds on the deck, heavier than standard patrol footwear. Combat boots, Kate realized. Another detail that didn't fit. Inside the cabin, Kate busied herself with coffee cups while tracking the officers' movements in the polished surface of her cabinet doors. They were spreading out, checking corners, sight lines. This wasn't a safety inspection, it was a tactical sweep. You've kept her in beautiful condition, Voss commented, running his hand along the teak trim. Must be lonely out here, though, all by yourself. Oh, I have Anchor for company, Kate smiled, her voice warm but her mind racing. The patrol boat's hull numbers, She'd noticed they were from the northern sector, not local. Wrong jurisdiction. Another red flag. The youngest officer picked up a framed photo of Kate in her uniform. "You served?" "Just a few years in administration," Kate lied smoothly, watching Voss's reaction. His eyes narrowed slightly. He knew who she was. This wasn't random. "Ma'am, we'll need to check your safety equipment," one officer called from the deck. "Accidents happen so quickly. Best to be prepared." The word accidents again. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Kate's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline she was carefully controlling. She recognized the signs of an impending assault, just as she had countless times during her career. "Of course, officers, everything should be in order." She shuffled toward the storage locker, moving with deliberate slowness. "Though I'm afraid I'm not as organized as I should be." Anchor growled softly at one of the officers, and Kate quickly shushed him. "Hush now. They're just doing their jobs." But her faithful companion had sensed the same wrongness she had. These men weren't here to inspect anything. The morning sun cast long shadows through the cabin windows as the officers continued their pretense of inspection. Kate noticed how they positioned themselves between her and any potential weapons or exits. Their questions became more pointed, their movements more purposeful. "Terrible business last night," Voss mentioned casually. "Some disturbance out on the water. You didn't happen to see anything unusual during your morning fishing, did you?" Kate adjusted her cardigan, using the movement to check her escape routes. "Oh, I'm afraid I'm not much help there. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and I was focused on my fishing. Caught nothing but seaweed, I'm afraid." She watched their reflections in the window glass, noting their positions, their stance, the subtle signs of concealed weapons under their uniforms. Everything about them screamed danger to her experienced eye, but she maintained her harmless elderly demeanor, knowing it was her only advantage. "Well, we should finish up our inspection," Voss said finally, his tone carrying an edge that made Kate's combat instincts scream warnings. "Can't be too careful out here. The sea can be very unforgiving." The morning light caught his cold gray eyes, and in that moment, Kate saw what she needed to see. These men hadn't come to inspect her boat. They had come to make her disappear. "Let's check below deck," Voss ordered his men, his practiced smile slipping slightly. "Standard procedure." Kate shuffled behind them, wringing her hands like a worried grandmother. "Oh dear, it's a bit messy down there. I haven't had a chance to tidy up." The officers descended into the yacht's lower compartment with practiced efficiency. Kate noticed how they moved, not like harbor patrol officers, but like tactical operators. Their movements were too smooth, too coordinated. She watched as they began pulling apart her storage spaces, their inspection becoming more aggressive by the minute. "My goodness," she fretted, playing up her elderly confusion. "Is all this really necessary?" One of the younger officers yanked open her navigation cabinet, spilling charts across the floor. Kate's hands twitched with the instinct to react, but she forced herself to stay in character, stooping slowly to gather the scattered papers. "I'm so sorry about the mess," she muttered, her eyes quickly scanning the papers as she collected them. That's when she saw it. One of her old command's patrol route charts had fallen from the officer's pocket. The markings on it were recent, showing shipping lanes and patrol patterns that shouldn't be in civilian hands. "Leave those," Voss snapped, snatching the papers away. But Kate had seen enough. The routes marked on that chart were classified information from her former command, information she'd helped develop during her last years of service. "Oh," she exclaimed, fumbling with her reading glasses. "Those look like military charts. How interesting. My late husband was in the Navy, you know. He used to—" "Ma'am," Voss cut her off sharply, "please stay topside while we complete our inspection." Kate nodded meekly and climbed back up, her mind racing beneath her confused exterior. Those weren't just any patrol routes. They were the specific patterns she'd designed to protect shipping lanes in the Gulf. Someone was using her own tactical plans to coordinate drug shipments. Through the cabin windows, she could see Voss's patrol boat clearly now. The communication array on their vessel caught her attention. It wasn't standard Coast Guard equipment. The encrypted tactical communication system was military-grade, the same type used in her former command operations. One of the officers emerged from below, carrying what looked like a standard patrol radio. But Kate's trained eye caught the subtle differences: the extra frequency bands, the military-grade encryption modules. This wasn't just harbor patrol gear. This was sophisticated naval intelligence equipment. "Everything seems to be in order below," the officer reported to Voss, but his tone carried an unspoken message. They hadn't found what they were looking for. Voss's jaw tightened as he studied a tablet displaying what appeared to be shipping manifests. Kate glimpsed the screen as she pretended to fuss with Anchor's collar. The documentation format was familiar. Too familiar. It was the same system her command had used to track naval vessels. "Ma'am," Voss called out, his voice harder now. "We need to verify some documentation. Mind explaining these registration numbers?" He held up her yacht's papers, but Kate's attention was on the tactical radio clipped to his belt. The encryption codes displayed on its small screen matched the secure channels her command had used during Gulf operations. These men weren't just corrupt harbor patrol officers. They were running a sophisticated operation using classified naval resources. "Oh dear." Kate adjusted her glasses, peering at the papers while her mind processed the implications. This wasn't random corruption or a simple smuggling operation. These men had access to classified naval intelligence, patrol routes, and tactical communications. They were using her former command security protocols to protect their criminal enterprise. "The registration?" Voss prompted again, impatience edging into his voice. Yes, let me find my reading glasses." Kate patted her pockets, buying time while she observed the tactical gear scattered across her deck. Every piece told the same story. This was a military-grade operation disguised as harbor patrol. The younger officers continued their aggressive search, throwing cushions aside and rifling through storage compartments. Kate noticed how they checked specific locations, places where someone with naval intelligence training would hide sensitive materials. "Here," Voss thrust a paper at her. "Explain these coordinates from your log." Kate squinted at the document, but her attention was on the tablet he'd set down. The screen showed shipping schedules annotated with familiar tactical codes. Her codes, the ones she'd developed for Gulf operations. They were using her own security protocols to move drug shipments through controlled waters. "I'm sorry," she fumbled with the paper. "My eyes aren't what they used to be. Perhaps if we had better light." The morning sun caught the military-grade tactical scope mounted on one officer's belt, equipment that no harbor patrol unit would possess. Every detail confirmed what Kate now understood. These men weren't just corrupt officers, they were running a sophisticated operation using classified naval resources, and they were using her former command's security protocols to do it. The realization hit her with cold clarity. This wasn't just about witnessing a crime anymore. They were using her life's work, her tactical plans, her security protocols, her command's resources, to protect their criminal enterprise. They had corrupted everything she'd spent her career building. Voss's face hardened as he snatched the paper back. "We'll need to see your navigation computer, now." "Sir!" A sharp call from below deck shattered the tense atmosphere. "You need to see this." Kate's heart sank as one of the younger officers emerged with a weathered photo album she'd forgotten to secure. Her precious memories, now weapons against her. Voss snatched the album, his cold gray eyes scanning the photographs. His expression shifted from irritation to sharp recognition as he flipped through pages of Kate in her naval uniform, standing proud on various ship decks, her Admiral's insignia gleaming. Well, Voss's voice turned to ice. "Admiral Catherine Flint, Persian Gulf Command Operations." He looked up at her, all pretense of civility vanishing. Not just some harmless retiree after all. Kate straightened instinctively, her elderly act falling away. No point maintaining the facade now. "Lieutenant Commander Voss," she acknowledged, her voice taking on its natural commanding tone. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "Search everything again," Voss barked at his men. "Every compartment, every hidden space. She's not just some civilian witness anymore." His hand moved to rest meaningfully on his sidearm. The Admiral here understands tactical operations. She'll have backup plans, secure communications, documentation. The younger officers rushed to comply, their previous pretense of a routine inspection abandoned as they tore through her cabin with renewed urgency. Kate watched them destroy her home, keeping her face carefully neutral even as her mind raced through survival scenarios. "Sir," another officer called out, emerging with her service medals and documentation. "Full military record here. 35 years of service. Intelligence background." Voss's expression darkened further. "Which means she's already figured out our operation. Haven't you, Admiral?" "Your unauthorized use of classified naval resources wasn't exactly subtle," Kate replied calmly, though her heart pounded. "Using my old command's patrol routes, my tactical protocols. Did you think I wouldn't recognize them?" "The question is," Voss stepped closer, menace radiating from his stance, "what are we going to do about it?" He turned to his men. "Secure the vessel. We're taking the Admiral to a more appropriate location for questioning." Kate knew exactly what that meant. She'd interrogated enough criminals during her career to recognize a death sentence when she heard one. They'd take her somewhere quiet, somewhere they could make her disappear without witnesses. "Thompson, Martinez, prepare the Admiral for transport," Voss ordered. "We need to handle this situation delicately." As the officers approached with handcuffs, Kate felt her military training surge to the surface. Decades of combat experience and tactical knowledge flooded back, replacing the peaceful retiree she'd become. Her eyes darted around the deck, cataloging weapons, escape routes, tactical advantages. "It's a shame, really," Voss continued, watching her with cold calculation. "You could have just kept fishing, enjoyed your retirement. Now we'll have to explain how a tragic accident claimed another veteran's life at sea." Kate's muscles tensed as the officers drew closer. She could see the shift in their movements. They were no longer maintaining any pretense of law enforcement. These were killers, preparing to eliminate a threat. Anchor, sensing the change in atmosphere, growled softly from his position near the cabin door. Kate silently thanked her years of military discipline for keeping her expression neutral as her mind formulated combat scenarios. "You really should have been more careful with those patrol routes," Kate remarked, her voice steady despite the dire situation. "Using classified protocols to run drugs, it's sloppy tradecraft." "And you should have stayed out of it," Voss snapped. "Martinez, secure her. We're burning daylight." Kate felt time slow down as the officer approached with handcuffs. Her retirement, her peaceful mornings on the water, her weekly calls with Melissa, all of it seemed to fade away as her combat-trained mind took over. She wasn't Catherine Flint, retired admiral and regretful mother anymore. She was becoming what decades of naval service had made her, a tactical commander facing a hostile force. The familiar weight of command settled onto her shoulders as she assessed her situation with military precision. 3 armed opponents, confined space, civilian vessel with limited tactical options. But she had advantages they didn't know about. Intimate knowledge of naval combat protocols, decades of hand-to-hand combat training, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. Martinez reached for her arm with the handcuffs. "Come quietly, Admiral. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Kate stood perfectly still, her weathered hands relaxed at her sides, but her mind was already mapping out angles of attack, calculating response times, preparing for what she knew would be the fight of her life. Her peaceful retirement had just ended. Now it was time to show these corrupted officers exactly why she'd reached the rank of Admiral. "Last chance, Admiral," Voss said, drawing his weapon. "Don't force us to do this the hard way." Kate's mind raced as Martinez approached with the handcuffs. In that split second, she made her decision. Time for the endgame. "Before you do anything hasty," she said, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of command, "there's something you should see." She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her hands visible. "May I?" Voss nodded tightly, his weapon trained on her chest. Kate reached down and pressed a hidden catch beneath her navigation station. A panel slid open with a soft click, revealing a compartment the inspection had missed. Inside, perfectly pressed and preserved, hung her full dress uniform, Admiral's stars gleaming in the morning light. The young officers froze, their eyes fixed on the uniform. Even Voss took an involuntary step back. It was one thing to find old photos, quite another to face the physical symbol of her authority. "That's right," Kate said, her voice growing stronger. "But that's not all I've been hiding." She reached deeper into the compartment and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "I think the Secretary of the Navy will be very interested in this." "You're bluffing," Voss snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Am I?" Kate's weathered hands opened the envelope, spreading photographs across her chart table. 6 months of surveillance, every drug shipment, every payoff, every single body you've dumped in my waters. Her sharp blue eyes met Voss's. "Did you really think I chose this particular marina by accident?" Martinez and Thompson exchanged nervous glances, their weapons lowered slightly. "My retirement was a cover," Kate continued, her voice hard as steel. "Authorized directly by the Secretary himself. We've known about the corruption in this command for months. What we needed was proof, and someone they wouldn't suspect to gather it." She pulled out a small recorder from another hidden compartment. Like this morning's conversation, for instance. Every threat, every admission, all transmitted live to a secure naval intelligence server. Voss's face had gone pale. "You're lying, this is some desperate play dash." "Call it in," Kate challenged. "Call your contacts at Naval Command. Ask them about Operation Silver Watch." She allowed herself a small, grim smile. "That's been my mission designation since I retired 6 months ago." The younger officers were visibly shaken now, their training warring with the sudden realization that they'd been threatening a senior officer on a covert mission. "The photos are genuine," Thompson said quietly, looking at the surveillance images. "Sir, these show everything. The shipments, the meetings, the disposals. I've spent my entire career protecting these waters," Kate said, her voice carrying the weight of her 35 years of service. "Did you think I'd just sail away when I saw them being poisoned by corruption? Being used to traffic drugs, being turned into a graveyard?" She straightened to her full height, and despite her casual sailing clothes, every inch of her radiated command presence. "Lieutenant Commander Voss, I am hereby relieving you of duty under Article 32 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Officers Thompson and Martinez, stand down and secure your weapons." The younger officers hesitated, looking between Kate and Voss. The balance of power had shifted palpably in the small cabin. "This is your one chance," Kate continued, focusing on the junior officers. "Cooperate now, testify about what you've witnessed, and there might be leniency. Continue supporting this criminal enterprise." She let the threat hang in the air. Thompson moved first, lowering his weapon. "Sir, ma'am, He swallowed hard. "I'm standing down." Martinez followed a moment later, his face a mask of shame and relief. "Admiral, we didn't know. I'm sorry." Only Voss remained, his weapon still raised, desperation replacing his earlier confidence. "You've ruined everything," he spat. "No, Lieutenant Commander," Kate replied calmly. "You did that yourself when you betrayed your oath." She nodded to Thompson. "Secure his weapon." "Don't move," Voss shouted, swinging his gun toward Thompson. But years of guilt and the weight of his actions had taken their toll. His hand shook. "It's over, Voss," Kate said quietly. "You're finished. The only question is how many more charges you want to add to your court-martial." The moment stretched taut as a cable under strain. Then finally, Voss's shoulders slumped, the weapon lowered. "Thompson, Martinez, secure the lieutenant commander," Kate ordered. "I believe the brig at Naval Base San Diego is expecting him." She reached for her radio, her real radio, hidden alongside her uniform. "This is Admiral Flint, Operation Silverwatch. Target secured. Send the extraction team." As the younger officers handcuffed their former commander, Kate allowed herself a small breath of relief. 6 months of playing the harmless retiree, of watching, waiting, and gathering evidence, had finally paid off. She'd protected her waters one last time. But as the adrenaline faded, her thoughts turned to Melissa. Maybe now, with her mission complete, she could finally focus on healing their relationship. Some battles, she knew, were harder than others. Kate watched the color drain from Voss's face as the implications of her words sank in. His gray eyes darted between the surveillance photos and the small recorder in her hand, his mind clearly racing to calculate just how thoroughly she had documented his operation. "Everything you've said in the last 20 minutes has already been transmitted," Kate said, her voice steady and controlled. "My contacts at Naval Intelligence are listening right now. They have been since you first stepped aboard." Voss's hands tightened on his weapon, knuckles white against the grip. "You've been playing us this whole time," he said, voice thick with rage. "All those morning fishing routines, the confused old retiree act. 35 years of command experience doesn't just disappear," Kate replied, keeping her tone measured despite the tension crackling through the cabin. "I chose this marina specifically because we suspected it was the hub of your smuggling operation. 6 months of patience watching and recording while you thought I was just another retired officer enjoying her golden years." Thompson and Martinez remained frozen, their weapons lowered but not holstered, caught between their corrupt commander and the Admiral who had just revealed herself. Voss's breathing grew ragged as he processed each new piece of information. The shipping schedules, the patrol routes. His eyes widened. "How much did you get?" "Everything," Kate said firmly. "Every altered patrol route. Every inspection that was really a drug transfer. Names, dates, coordinates. The bodies you dumped this morning were just the final piece of evidence we needed." A dangerous gleam entered Voss's eyes. The measured calculation of a corrupt officer was giving way to something more primal, the desperation of a cornered animal. His weapon, which had lowered slightly during the revelation, snapped back up to point directly at Kate's chest. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "You think having all that evidence matters if you don't live to testify?" Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Maybe there's a tragic accident at sea, the curious retired admiral who got too close to something dangerous. Kate's tactical training kicked into high gear, reading the subtle shifts in Voss's stance, the micro-expressions that telegraphed his intent. He was moving past rational thought into pure survival mode, the most dangerous state for an armed opponent. "Think it through, Lieutenant Commander," she said, using his rank deliberately. "My disappearance would only confirm everything in those files. You really think you can silence everyone who's received that evidence?" "Shut up," Voss shouted, taking a step forward. "You don't understand. I can't let this get out. I won't let you destroy everything I've built." Thompson flinched at the outburst, but Kate remained still, her blue eyes locked on Voss. Years of command experience had taught her that movement in these situations often triggered violence. She kept her voice calm, authoritative. "Your operation is already destroyed, Voss. The only choice you have now is how this ends." The cabin filled with the sound of Voss's ragged breathing as he processed her words. His weapon wavered slightly, the tremor of a man realizing he had no good options left. "Martinez, Thompson," he barked suddenly. "Secure the Admiral. We're taking this boat out to deeper water." Neither junior officer moved. "That's an order!" Voss screamed, his composure cracking completely. "Stand fast," Kate commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Think carefully about your next action, officers. Supporting a criminal enterprise is one thing. Conspiracy to murder a flag officer is quite another." Martinez swallowed hard. "Sir, I can't." "Cowards," Voss spat. His weapon swung wildly between Kate and his subordinates. "You're all cowards. Do you know what they'll do to me in prison? What the cartels will do when they find out I've been compromised?" Kate saw the moment rational thought left his eyes entirely. His finger tightened on the trigger as raw panic took over. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of cornered enemies who had nothing left to lose. It was the most dangerous moment in any confrontation, when fear overcame training, when desperation erased consequences. "It's over, Voss," she said firmly, knowing her words probably wouldn't reach him now. "Don't make this worse than it already is." But she could see in his eyes that they were past the point of peaceful resolution. Voss's world had collapsed in the span of 10 minutes, and his mind had snapped under the pressure. He was no longer the calculating criminal mastermind, but something far more volatile. The weapon in his hand steadied as desperation crystallized into deadly purpose. "If I'm going down," he said, his voice eerily calm, "I'm taking you with me, Admiral." Kate's muscles tensed, ready to move. Decades of training had prepared her for moments exactly like this. She watched Voss's trigger finger, waited for the subtle tells that would telegraph his next move. The cramped cabin of her yacht had become a battlefield, and she knew the next few seconds would determine who walked away from it. The flash of Voss's movement was all Kate needed. As his finger squeezed the trigger, she was already in motion. Years of combat training took over as she drove her shoulder into Thompson, using him as a shield while simultaneously grabbing his wrist to direct his weapon toward Voss. The gunshot cracked through the cabin. The bullet splintered wood inches from where Kate had been standing. Before Voss could fire again, Kate had Thompson's weapon. She kicked the young officer's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling across the deck. Martinez lunged forward, but Kate's elbow caught him squarely in the solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for air. The confined space of the cabin worked to Kate's advantage, her close-quarters combat training making every movement precise and devastating. "Drop it, Voss," Kate commanded, but he was beyond reasoning. He fired again, the shot going wide as Kate rolled behind the navigation console. The bullet punctured the hull near the waterline, the sound of rushing water immediately filling the cabin. "You're going to kill us all," Kate shouted, but Voss was firing wildly now, each shot causing more damage to the yacht. Water began pooling around their feet as the compass rose started taking on water. Thompson struggled to his feet, trying to flank Kate's position. She caught his movement in her peripheral vision and spun, catching his arm in a joint lock that sent him crashing into the helm controls. The impact knocked the yacht off course, causing everyone to stumble as the boat lurched violently. The water was rising faster now, sloshing around their ankles. Kate could feel her beloved yacht listing to port as more water poured through multiple hull breaches. The situation had become a deadly triangle. Kate trying to subdue the corrupt officers, Voss still firing with desperate abandon, and the rising water threatening to sink them all. Martinez recovered enough to make another attempt, but Kate's training was simply too much for him. She redirected his momentum, sending him sprawling into the rising water. His head struck the cabinet with a sickening thud, leaving him dazed and gasping. "The boat's going down," Kate shouted over the chaos. "We need to stop this now." But Voss was beyond reason, his eyes wild with panic and rage. He fired again, the shot punching through another section of hull, accelerating the flooding. Kate used the rising water to her advantage, waiting for Voss to slip slightly before launching herself across the cabin. Her shoulder caught him in the midsection, driving him back against the bulkhead. His weapon discharged once more into the ceiling before Kate knocked it from his grip with a precise strike to his wrist. The yacht groaned ominously as more water poured in. The deck was tilting more severely now, making it difficult for anyone to maintain their footing. Equipment started sliding across surfaces, creating dangerous projectiles in the confined space. Thompson made one final desperate attempt, grabbing a flare gun from the emergency kit. Kate saw the movement and reacted instantly, catching his wrist and twisting. The flare gun discharged harmlessly into the water, sending up a hiss of steam. The rising water had reached their knees now, and the compass rose was listing badly to port. Kate could hear the hull creaking under the strain. She knew they had minutes at most before the yacht went down completely. Voss scrambled for his fallen weapon, but Kate was faster. Her boot came down hard on his hand, pinning it to the deck. He screamed in pain and rage, thrashing in the rising water like a wounded animal. "It's over!" Kate's voice cut through the chaos. "The boat is sinking. We can either work together to survive, or we all go down. Make your choice." The cold reality of their situation finally seemed to penetrate Voss's panic. The water was now waist-deep, and the yacht's groaning had become a continuous sound of stressed metal and wood. Equipment continued to crash around them as the deck angle increased. Martinez had managed to pull himself up onto a tilted console, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Thompson stood pressed against the bulkhead, his young face pale with fear as he watched the water rise. The fighting spirit had drained from both junior officers as survival instinct took over. Voss made one last desperate lunge toward Kate, but she met him with a precise strike to the throat. He collapsed into the water, choking and sputtering. Kate quickly secured his hands with a length of rope from the emergency kit, making sure he couldn't cause any more damage. The Compass Rose shuddered violently, and a new torrent of water burst through the weakened hull. The yacht was dying, Kate realized with a pang of sadness. Her peaceful retirement home was transforming into a potential watery grave for everyone aboard. The water continued to rise as the yacht settled deeper into the ocean, turning their violent confrontation into a desperate race against time. The immediate threat of violence had been replaced by an even deadlier enemy, the relentless ocean pouring into the damaged vessel. Kate had subdued her attackers through superior training and experience, but now she faced the challenge of keeping everyone alive as her beloved yacht slipped beneath the waves. The freezing water swirled around Kate's chest as she fought to maintain her footing on the tilting deck. The Compass Rose groaned beneath them, listing more severely with each passing moment. She had to act fast. The evidence that could expose Voss's entire network was stored in a waterproof case beneath her bunk, but reaching it meant leaving her subdued attackers unguarded. "Thompson," she barked at the youngest officer who was clinging to a cabinet. "Get the life raft from the stern locker, now." Her commanding tone cut through his panic, and he stumbled through the rising water to comply. Kate kept her eyes on Voss while she reached for the emergency pump controls. The corrupt commander was still bound, but his eyes blazed with hatred as he watched her. Water continued to pour through the bullet holes in the hull, but the pump might buy them precious minutes. The evidence case was wedged tight, and Kate had to dive beneath the churning water to free it. Her lungs burned as she worked the case loose, knowing everything she'd gathered over months of investigation was inside. Patrol schedules, shipping manifestos, recorded conversations, all pointing to a corruption network that reached deep into the naval command structure. A crash from above drew her attention. Martinez had lost his grip and slammed into the helm console, striking his head. The young officer slumped unconscious into the rising water. Without hesitation, Kate secured the evidence case to her belt and fought her way through the chest-deep water toward him. "He tried to kill you," Voss shouted over the chaos. "Let him drown." Kate ignored him, reaching Martinez just as his head slipped beneath the surface. She grabbed his tactical vest and heaved upward, straining against his weight and the water's pull. Her muscles screamed in protest as she managed to prop his head above water, keeping him from drowning. "Thompson," she called out, "help me with him." The young officer had returned with the life raft canister, his face pale but determined. Together, they maneuvered Martinez's unconscious form toward the cockpit where the water was shallower. The yacht shuddered violently, tilting further to port. Kate heard the terrible sound of water rushing into the engine compartment. They had minutes at most before the Compass Rose went down completely. "Deploy the raft," Kate ordered Thompson. "Get Martinez aboard first." She could see the conflict in the young officer's eyes, duty to his corrupt commander warring with the basic human decency Kate had shown by saving his fellow officer. While Thompson worked to inflate the life raft, Kate made one final dive into the flooded cabin. The water was up to the ceiling now, with only a small air pocket remaining. She had to be sure she hadn't missed any crucial evidence. Her hands found Martinez's dropped weapon and she secured it, not willing to leave firearms where Voss might reach them. The cold water numbed her fingers as she quickly searched the remaining accessible spaces. A muffled cry drew her attention back to the cockpit. Thompson was struggling with the unconscious Martinez, unable to lift him into the bobbing life raft alone. Without the proper leverage, he risked dropping his fellow officer back into the churning water. Kate surged forward to help, but movement caught her eye. Voss had somehow worked one hand free from his restraints. Despite her exhaustion, Kate's combat instincts took over. She intercepted his desperate lunge, deflecting his attack while maintaining her grip on Martinez. "Help me save him," she commanded Voss, her voice carrying the full weight of her Admiral's authority. "Or we all go down with the ship." For a moment she thought he would refuse. But as another wave washed over the sinking yacht, survival instinct won out. Together, they managed to heave Martinez's limp form into the life raft while Thompson stabilized it. The Compass Rose gave a final shuddering groan. Kate felt the deck dropping away beneath her feet as the yacht began its final plunge. With one powerful movement, she shoved Thompson into the raft, then helped push Voss aboard despite knowing he'd tried to murder her minutes earlier. Only when all three men were safely in the raft did Kate allow herself to climb aboard, the waterproof case containing the vital evidence still secured to her belt. Her beloved yacht slipped beneath the waves behind them, but she had protected both the evidence and her principles. Thompson stared at her with a mixture of awe and shame. "You saved us," he said quietly. "After what we did, you still saved us." "I'm a naval officer," Kate replied firmly, checking Martinez's pulse and finding it steady. "We don't leave people to drown, no matter who they are." She secured Voss with a fresh length of rope from the raft's emergency kit, then began treating Martinez's head wound with supplies from the first aid kit. The evidence was safe, her attackers were subdued, and though the compass rose was lost, no lives had been forfeited to violence or the sea. Kate had maintained not just her tactical advantage, but the moral high ground that had defined her entire naval career. The morning sun glinted off the polished brass fixtures in the San Diego Naval Station's main conference room. Kate sat straight-backed in her chair as the Secretary of the Navy addressed the assembled officers and federal agents. Her admiral's uniform was crisp and perfect, though her hands still showed the rope burns from the confrontation at sea 3 days ago. "Thanks to Admiral Flint's extraordinary work," the Secretary announced, "we've arrested 32 individuals involved in this corruption ring, including 6 senior officers." He gestured to the evidence displays showing surveillance photos, financial records, and patrol route alterations. The depth of this conspiracy threatened the very integrity of our Pacific naval operations. Kate watched as federal agents led Voss and his crew through a side door, their hands cuffed behind their backs. The former commander's face was ashen as he realized the full scope of what Kate had uncovered. His eyes met hers briefly, and she saw the final understanding dawn, that her apparent retirement had been carefully orchestrated to expose his entire network. After the briefing, Kate stepped into the bright Southern California sunshine. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Melissa. "Mom, just saw you on the news. Can we talk? In person?" Kate's heart squeezed in her chest. She typed back with slightly trembling fingers. "Of course. I'll come right over." 30 minutes later, Kate stood on Melissa's modest front porch, smoothing her uniform jacket nervously. Before she could knock, the door flew open. Melissa stood there, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "You could have died out there," Melissa said, her voice thick with emotion. "That commander, they said on the news he killed 3 people." "I had a duty to stop him," Kate replied softly. "Just like I've always had a duty to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." Melissa stepped back, inviting her mother inside. The small living room was cluttered with Tommy's toys, her 8-year-old grandson's presence visible in the scattered Lego bricks and superhero figures. "I saw the interview with that young officer, Thompson," Melissa said, sinking onto the worn couch. "He told the reporters how you saved Martinez's life, even after they tried to kill you. How you made sure everyone got into the life raft safely." Kate sat carefully beside her daughter. "It's what we're trained to do." "No," Melissa shook her head firmly. "Thompson said most people would have let them drown. He said you showed him what real honor looks like." She took a shaky breath. "And that's when I finally understood." "Understood what?" Kate asked quietly. "All those years when you were away on deployments, I thought you were choosing your career over me." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "But you weren't, were you? You were protecting people. Protecting me, even if I couldn't see it." Kate felt her own eyes growing damp. "Everything I did was to make the world safer for you, Melissa. Every mission, every deployment, it was all about making sure you could grow up in a better world." "Tommy's been watching the news coverage non-stop," Melissa said with a watery laugh. "He keeps telling everyone his grandmother is a real-life superhero." She reached for Kate's hand. "He's not wrong." Kate squeezed her daughter's fingers gently. "I'm sorry I couldn't explain more when you were young. Some missions had to stay classified, but I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped wanting to make you proud." "I understand now," Melissa whispered. "When I saw you on that news footage, still trying to save the lives of men who tried to kill you, I finally saw what Dad always tried to tell me. that your sense of duty wasn't about choosing the Navy over family. It was about choosing to protect everyone's family. A small figure appeared in the doorway, clutching a newspaper. "Grandma!" Tommy launched himself at Kate, who caught him in a careful hug. He thrust the paper at her, showing the front-page photo of her being rescued from the life raft. "You're a hero." "Your grandmother's always been a hero," Melissa said softly. "I just didn't understand what that really meant until now." Kate held her grandson close, meeting her daughter's eyes over his head. The decades of distance between them seemed to dissolve in that moment, replaced by something new: understanding, respect, and the chance to rebuild what had been broken. "Will you stay for dinner?" Melissa asked. "Tommy has about 1,000,000 questions about your secret mission." "And about the bad guys," Tommy added excitedly, "and the sinking boat, and how you fought them all." Kate smiled, feeling the weight of years of separation finally lifting from her shoulders. "I'd love to stay," she said. "I think it's time I shared some stories with both of you." Melissa squeezed her mother's hand again, and Kate saw in her daughter's eyes the same strength and moral courage she'd always tried to instill. Different paths, but the same core values. Finally, after all these years, they truly saw each other. The Compass Rose cut smoothly through the calm waters of San Diego Bay, her white sails billowing in the gentle afternoon breeze. Kate stood at the helm, her weathered hands resting lightly on the wheel as she watched Melissa adjusting the main sheet with confident movements. "You haven't forgotten your sailing lessons after all," Kate said, pride warming her voice. Melissa smiled, the sun highlighting the touches of silver in her dark hair, so like Kate's own. "Some things stick with you, even when you think you've left them behind." 8-year-old Tommy bounced excitedly around the deck, his life jacket secure and his eyes wide with wonder. "This is so cool. Can I steer next, Grandma?" "Once we get to open water," Kate promised, her heart swelling at the simple joy of having her family aboard. Anchor, her golden retriever, lounged contentedly in the shade of the mainsail, completing their little crew. The past 2 weeks had brought more healing than Kate had thought possible. After decades of distance, she and Melissa had finally found their way back to each other. Their weekly phone calls had transformed into daily visits, shared meals, and now this, their first family sail together in over 20 years. "Remember when Dad used to take us out?" Melissa asked, settling beside Kate at the helm. "Before all the deployment started?" Kate nodded, feeling the familiar twinge of old regrets, but now tempered by new understanding. "I missed so many weekends like this. Always another mission, another crisis to handle." "I get it now," Melissa said softly. "After everything that happened with Voss and his crew, seeing you risk everything to protect people you didn't even know." She adjusted the wheel slightly, compensating for a shift in the wind. "That's who you've always been." "I just wish I'd found a better balance," Kate admitted. "Duty doesn't always mean choosing between family and service. Sometimes it means finding a way to honor both." Tommy interrupted their moment of reflection, pointing excitedly toward the horizon. "Look, dolphins!" They watched as a pod of bottlenose dolphins played in their wake, leaping and spinning in the afternoon sun. Kate showed Tommy how to read the depth finder and chart their course, his small hands eager on the instruments. "Just like a real admiral," he exclaimed. Melissa laughed. "Your grandmother's teaching you more than just navigation, honey. She's showing you about integrity and doing what's right, even when it's hard." Kate felt her eyes growing misty. "Speaking of navigation," she said, "ready to take the wheel, sailor?" Tommy's face lit up as Kate guided his hands to the proper position on the wheel. She stood behind him, helping him maintain their course, while Melissa adjusted the sails to compensate for his occasional overcorrections. "You're a natural," Kate told him, watching his concentration as he focused on the compass. "Just like your mother was at your age." "Really?" Tommy looked back at Melissa with newfound admiration. "Really," Kate confirmed, though she was better at knots than steering, as I recall. Melissa demonstrated by quickly tying a perfect bowline. "Some skills never leave you," she said meaningfully, meeting Kate's eyes. They sailed past Point Loma, the lighthouse standing sentinel against the blue sky. Kate remembered all the times she'd navigated these waters alone, missing her family, but believing her duty required that sacrifice. Now she understood. True strength wasn't in isolation, but in connection. "Mom," Melissa said quietly while Tommy was distracted by another dolphin sighting. "I've been thinking about getting a small sailboat. Maybe we could take Tommy out regularly, make it our thing." Kate had to swallow hard before responding. "I'd love that more than anything." "Me too," Melissa smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. "We've lost enough time already." They spent the afternoon teaching Tommy the basics of sailing, 3 generations working together in an easy rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Kate showed him how to read the wind, while Melissa explained the physics of sailing in terms an 8-year-old could grasp. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Kate realized that this mission, her last and most important, had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes. She had exposed corruption and protected her beloved Navy. Yes, but she had also rebuilt the bridge to her daughter's heart. "Ready to head back?" she asked, watching Tommy stifle a yawn. "5 more minutes?" he pleaded, still holding the wheel with determined focus. Kate met Melissa's eyes, seeing in them the same love and understanding that had been missing for so long. 5 more minutes, she agreed, knowing that now they had all the time in the world to make up for what was lost. The compass rose turned gently homeward, carrying its precious cargo of restored relationships and new beginnings. Kate's legacy would live on not through military honors or medals, but through the love and values she could now freely share with her daughter and grandson. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.